Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Overdose and Chill, episode number 88. And we're joined by the eponymous Paul, joining us all the way from London this time on a Take Two effort. Paul, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks very much, Todd. And well, thanks for 88. Lucky numbers.
It is indeed. It is indeed. So we attempted this a couple of weeks ago when Paul was in South Africa, but we lost our connection halfway through. For those of you who don't know Paul Greenberg, Paul and I first met when he founded the NORA Network, and I now work with his advisory board. And Paul is kind of synonymous across the Australian retail e-commerce industry. He's now expanded his portfolio into what he refers to as JamPad, which is a combination of advisory and board roles, as well as portfolio investments. And I'm very excited to actually talk about some of the charities that Paul works with. Paul, why don't you give us a quick introduction for yourself? Obviously, you've made the journey from South Africa to Australia, and now you're over in London. Complete jet setter. Tell the world who Paul Greenberg is if they don't already know you, my friend.
Oh, well, what an intro. No, that's great. Well, thanks very much, Todd. And good morning, everyone. Well, it's 5 a.m. in London. You can see the sun's coming up, and I think that's the lovely Shard building in the background. But by way of introduction, as Todd so kindly said, my background is, of course, retail over the last sort of 25 years or so in Australia, e-commerce and specifically online retail. I've had and I hold a portfolio of roles, some commercial roles. I'm the chairman of My Deal. I think we could chat a bit more about that.
Mm-hmm.
Early years, I was the founder of Deals Direct, which is a well-known pioneer online retailer. And of course, very proudly now the non-executive chair of NORA, the National Online Retailers Association, which I founded back in 2012-13. So yeah, I've got a lot of different hats. I might need to borrow some of those behind you there, Todd,
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
there are a few hats I'm wearing, but very privileged to be part of this exciting and very dynamic, ecosystem, which is, I was going to say Australian online retail, but actually global online retail. So I'm here at Shop Talk, for example. It started yesterday. It runs today and tomorrow down at the lovely Excel Convention Centre in London. Getting some global perspectives on the way the world's turning for all of us.
So, Paul, there's so many topics we could dive into. What I'd love to start with is take it all the way back to where this all started. How did you actually get into online retail? Was it, really early days of eBay? How did you actually break that mold? How far back does that experience go?
Yeah, thanks. I suppose they say everyone deserves an autobiography. We've all got a great story to tell, but for me, it's a lovely story. I mean, essentially, 40 odd years in entrepreneurship and specifically retail. But rewind the tape, I think, for the purpose of this chat and for people listening in the mid 90s. I left from Cape Town, South Africa, to come to Australia. And we had a bit of a challenge back in those days. There was exchange control. So you couldn't, I was 35 years old, moving to Australia, young family in mind. You couldn't take your money from South Africa to Australia for some reason. You could take a few $1,000s. But I had a nice collection of vintage guitars. So we've all got our little fetishes, your caps behind you, my vintage guitars. I think we're all got the collector's bug somewhere. So I brought those guitars over to Australia. My first commercial failure in Australia was the Vintage Guitar Cafe on Parramatta Road, Annandale, which was a lovely guitar shop with a coffee machine and a few other things. And when my bank manager said it looks like a poor man's hard rock cafe, I knew I was in a bit of trouble. And of course, it didn't last, but I had a wonderful year or two, a sort of nice career sabbatical, sort of being surrounded by beautiful vintage instruments, meeting some interesting rock musicians in Australia. Music's probably my first love. But on a serious matter, with a young family, when it came time to getting serious, I had this lovely collection of vintage guitars and no cash. And someone said, this would have been 96, 97, Todd. Someone said, you should try flog them on eBay. eBay in 96, 97 was a year old, maybe 2 years old. It was brand new. And I thought, okay, I'll give this a crack. I'd never heard of it, like many people. And that started an accidental journey of entrepreneurship in online retail in Australia. So selling some vintage guitars on eBay led to a relationship with eBay, essentially working with them, building out a trading assistance program, starting out a brand called Auction Brokers, which became eBay's largest seller in Australia. Actually, globally at one stage, I think we were up there at number one. And that then in turn led to, in 2004, so that's sort of 9 years, led to Deals Direct. Started that in 2004 with Mike Rosenbaum, and then that led to a commercial exit in 2012 to venture capital. That in turn led to me in my early 50s saying, what now? And of course, the idea of NORA had been floating around for a while, an advocacy group, an industry group or network or body representing online retail. That led to NORA.
And what kind of numbers are NORA running now? Because I remember that inception, but it seems NORA is almost driving the industry today.
Oh, it's a great compliment, and it's quite an interesting story because I'm non-executive, as I mentioned at the beginning of our chat. So there's a wonderful team. Adele, Katie, Gareth, Ellie. I could go on. There's a lovely. I mean, not a big team. There's a team of, I think, 10 people, but it feels like there's a lot more because they're covering an enormous amount of ground. And yeah, I mean, the NORA team, say 10, 12 people, membership base, well over 25,000 now. Australian online retailers, and of course, valuable solution partners with Overdose being right up there, providing, thought leadership to the industry, really connecting the dots, creating, as you said, NORA at its core is an association, but I prefer to see it more as a network, a catalyst for collaboration, for conversation, and raising the bar and profile. So it is an incredible little organization without patronizing the great work that everyone does. And I'm very proud to have sort of been involved in its inception, but just as importantly now, non-executive and supporting the team, like so many of you, Todd, including yourself, the advisory board, all the incredible people in this network do. And I think Katie and Adele and the team would be very proud to hear you say that. So thanks for the shout out.
Most welcome. So with those, with such an incredible history behind you, Paul, when you've been moving from that career progression from entrepreneur into advisor, non-exec, exec, when you're working with those retail brands, where do you feel that wisdom is that you're bringing to those brands? Is it understanding that the past dictates the future, or understanding of ecosystems, or maybe it's even tempering some of the entrepreneurial appetite? As I'm in my 40s now, and I see that the rate of change of entrepreneurialism is almost like a year of decay each time, and the expectation of growth becomes faster and faster. So I'd love to know, obviously sitting with people like In Situ and Culture Kings, some real incredible brands there. What's the value that you see that the wisdom and experience brings?
I think that's a great question. And I think, to be frank, I think we all suffer from a little bit of imposter syndrome. And sometimes I sit there in board meetings wondering, and, hoping that I'm adding value. But I think these are very savvy entrepreneurs who get rid of me very quickly if I wasn't. So, but, I think it's a fair question, and something that I think we all need to mull on in any role we're doing. What is the value we add? Well, I would say that, a couple of things. One is, I talk about the 4 A's of being a good advisor, and that the first one is obviously advice. But in many cases, I think, when you mention the likes of Culture Kings, In Situ, Afterpay, My Deal, I mean, you're working with incredibly smart and talented founders. And I find advice is often, they always need a listening ear, but often advice is not what they need. But let's give it the first A as advice. The second one is ambassadorship. You've got to be proud of these brands you're working with. So you've got to be able to, sell it on the inside and before you sell it on the outside. Lovely old saying that. To provide that ambassadorship and say, I'm the chairman of My Deal. Incredibly proud. So there's that ambassadorship which you provide to these founders. There's advocacy, which is similar, but it can be a little bit more louder. When you have to step up and provide that advocacy. And then the last one is access. So I think I made an introduction today to you guys over at Refunded. Said they'd love to chat with you. So I said, Brad, meet Todd, Todd, meet Brad, and then I step away. So the 4 A's: advice, ambassadorship, advocacy, and access. I think that's what I provide. Wrapped around that, of course, after 40 years in business, for myself, a litany of mistakes and missteps, which I love to share with people. Often they're as valuable as the successes. And so I think so that kind of, there's more to it than that, obviously. And of course, most importantly, Todd, and you're a business founder, you're a business entrepreneur, we all need encouragement. There's a lot of critics in the world, and that's all not going to change. But I think from time to time, as founders, as entrepreneurs, we're creating our own path. Support and encouragement are very important ingredients that are sometimes missing. It can be quite lonely.
I will concur with that. Entrepreneurialism can be a lonely journey, and one of the areas I've looked to expand as we've grown Overdose is having a group of people around me, and that a problem shared is a problem halved. Through those like-minded networks. So
true.
As you've grown in that sort of board level role, obviously, from what you're saying, it's constantly learning. Do you suffer from those scenarios where you're working with such incredible brands that you just want to get your hands really dirty, but you have to know what is the safe distance to keep?
Such a good question. It's such a powerful point that I think will resonate with everyone. I think invariably sometimes we struggle where that line is, but I did mention to you that I'm the sort of non-executive chairman of NORA. I'm the non-executive chairman of My Deal. I guess, I'm on the advisory board of Culture Kings and Institute, obviously, with Afterpay. I actually am very good at starting things, supporting things. I'm not so great at running things. So I'm actually not the best operational guy you want in your squad. There's infinitely better people out there. So I think not only have I learned where that line is over the years, I've also learned my strengths and my weaknesses, if that's the right term. And actually, Nora's a fine shout out where, operationally, Adele and Katie are really doing an infinitely better job than I ever did. They took it to the next level. I'm definitely know where my limits are, and I make sure I stay on the right side of the line. And I think the danger is to me the simple truism of management, leadership run a business, not the board. I think it's very important, and even at ASX level we see boards step over that line, and it can lead to a lot of friction. That's not to say you're as a board member you're passive, but you're definitely not in the weeds. You're there to provide the necessary governance, guidance, but you shouldn't be grabbing the wheel. And fortunately, touch wood, I haven't been. But I think there's also a lot of luck in business. Some of the businesses I've worked with over the last, sort of 4 or 5 years, have been sort of sold. I worked with a company called Selz, SELZ. For a short while, they were heading to an IPO, and they got acquired by Amazon. Kind of there goes my gig. But I was obviously very pleased for them. Obviously, My Deal has just had a takeover offer from Woolworths. Afterpay has merged, obviously, as we know, with Block. So I think the Institute guys must be getting a bit nervous. Not that they've got any plans, but it seems to me, obviously, Culture Kings acquired by AKA Brands. So it almost seems like, hold on, guys, but I'm very pleased and proud of all those examples that I've mentioned. And of course, very important to note that the journeys are continuing for those founders. I wrote a little short op-ed piece on LinkedIn that I don't like the term exit strategy, because, the entrepreneurs I work with, these are not exits for them. Yes, they get some liquidity capital, which is really nice, but they go on to the next stage of the journey.
Absolutely.
Culture Kings with AKA Brands, Afterpay with Block, Selz with Amazon. My Deal will. Sean and the team are very engaged with Woolworths. This is a wonderful partnership in play. So it's not an end; it's very much a beginning.
Well, let's come back to My Deal. I just wanted to touch on what you mentioned there, and I think I recently did a podcast for some business students in New Zealand, and I was put on the same spot of, what does it take to make a good entrepreneur? And I think the biggest learning I had, very similar to yourself, was the acceptance of your weaknesses. And I think there's a maturity path that you go through where every entrepreneur tries to be this genius at every part, every moving cog of their business, right? You know, you're literally trying to be the sales, the supply engine, you know, Mr. Motivator of everything happening. And I think, you know, in my journey, this is sort of my third or fourth company, is that point of where you said, I'm actually terrible at doing this. I'm incredible at these 3 or 4 things, but these are my genuine weaknesses. And I can still recall the day when, you know, Paul, who I run the business with, came to me and said, you need to stop trying to get good at the things that you're bad at and be 3x at the things that you're already exceptional at. And that just rocket lifted our company. And it was a complete mindset shift for me. And I think it's a real struggle that entrepreneurs have, where why things become lonely is because you're trying to do every job within the business. And it's literally that release mechanism. And to be honest, it's a struggle we've had where we've never put a board in place yet, Paul. So we've always kind of looked at it as we dabbled with it a few times and had some input and said, I think we don't gel correctly. But we're getting to that evolution point now, you know, 400, 500 staff, where external points of view are actually really valuable. And we very quickly learned that just because you've got a board doesn't mean you have to listen to them, right? It's there as advisory, not as compliance. Yeah. Okay, sorry, that was me going down the rabbit hole, buddy.
Well, can I pick up on
please.
some of those wisdom pieces? So I absolutely agree with everything you've just said. My aha moment, Todd, was when someone said to me, Paul, if you keep working on your weaknesses, you'll end up with strong weaknesses. Mm-hmm. And that was my, you know, sort of aha moment, which you got from your Paul. Secondly, you know, further down the river, our good friend William Shakespeare says, above all, know thyself. And I found that a limiter for many of us is we don't always take that journey of self-awareness. And so people I've worked with, people that have worked with me, often the ones that I found the hardest to work with are the ones who just don't want to go down that journey of like self-examination. Doesn't mean years of psychotherapy, but you've got to know who you are and who you're not. You know, as you say, where your strong points are and where you have to surround yourself with people who can then, you know, support you in that journey. So I couldn't agree with you more. And I think, you know, if anyone takes anything away from this chat, that's that point. Above all, know thyself. And, you know, great entrepreneurs. And then my last sort of, I suppose, I'm known as the king of one line, but I find they can be useful in the interest of time. You know, good entrepreneurs have the wisdom to take contribution, but the courage to make the call. And if you can also just hold on to that line where you really open-mindedly listen to well-meaning advisors, but you realize that eventually the buck's going to stop with you and you've got to make the call.
Fantastic. So we've gone through this journey. You've been a successful retailer, you've set up the association, and then you start investing into brands, probably more so into product, I would say, than brands through the investment arm. Apart from obviously the caliber of the entrepreneurs that you're looking for to work with, what are you looking for from a product or positioning perspective? Because I'm sure your inbox is full of opportunities. What are those highlights and trigger points for yourself?
Yeah, thanks very much. Well, for that opportunity to plug, as you say, Jampad is I guess a family office, you know, a small one that really sort of scouts the horizon for when you say product, I would say retail tech solutions. That, you know, what it is tech product or, you know, retail tech that, you know, really can help remove friction in the retail journey for shoppers and help merchants grow their business. And of course, no better example in the portfolio than Afterpay, which, you know, from day one, you know, was going to always be very successful. You know, and the founders obviously have the resilience, you know, to ride with the very dynamic nature of that industry. But I guess where I've been fortunate, and I do get a lot of inquiries, and in fact, on another aside there, let me hold my line. I was going through a bit of a period where I was a little bit overwhelmed with the inbound, and I was having a chat with my good old friend Gabby from Catch, Gabby Leibovich, who was an old friend of me and now a very, very good friend. And Gabby said to me, he's a bit younger than me, but not that much younger. He said, I never say no to a coffee, Paul. It was a moment of humility for me where I realized he's absolutely right. And I try wherever possible to catch up with people. I'm traveling for a few months now, a working trip, so it's Zoom. But so I get a lot of inbound inquiry. I have a look at them with my retailer lens because, it's a privilege to be on the solution side, as we both are, you with Overdose, me, say, with NORA, but also to have come from the other side of the counter. And with my retailer eye, I look at all the retail tech that comes through my desk or over my inbox, and I say, well, does that remove friction for shoppers? Very simple question. Or does it have the potential to remove friction for shoppers? And does it help merchants grow their businesses? And if I can give a broad tick to both of those, then we go to the next level. And then there's a whole lot of, there's a lot of heart, but there's quite a lot of head looking at the opportunities. And, invariably one of my favorites, another one-liner is, you've got to back the jockey as much as the horse. So it's always about that limbic connection to the founders. And I've got probably a dozen or so rolling around. It's comfortable. And some of them are doing incredibly well. The good old-fashioned bell curve. Some of them are finding it a bit hard going, especially in the current climate. And the middle rump of the bell curve, they're ticking along very well. So, touch wood. There's some incredible people out there, and Jampad's been a great journey, which really only started, I suppose, over the last I don't know, 6-7 years. So it's quite new.
And you mentioned a word there which I'd like to kind of dig into, because when these brands are going through not their exit but their investment and there's PE, that can be, having been there myself, it can almost be relatively traumatic at some point, where you're unveiling the cloak of your business. And you mentioned the word resilience there. How do your founders and entrepreneurs that you work with demonstrate that resilience?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, where do we start? Because I think if I can sort of give another shout out, not for myself, but for the profession of psychology. I'm also a registered psychologist.
Oh, wow.
Not that I practice. I have a strong bias and interest in organizational psychology, not clinical psychology. But I've been registered in Australia since I arrived here well over 25 years ago. So I've held that registration. I read the journals. I'm very interested in how people tick, how I tick, the self-awareness journey. And that resilience, comes up a lot. It means different things to different people. But invariably, I've watched founders go through some incredibly robust, processes. And as you say, those liquidity event opportunities are in themselves almost like running two jobs at once. They're running their organization. They may not take their eye off the ball. And then they've got this very robust, you say you've been through it, robust experience of really, working with their team and working with counterparties and advisors around what opportunities are there. I guess it's very hard to distill what, the attributes that make these successful. But I think obviously, incredible energy, a work ethic. That another reason why I went non-executive. I just cannot or could not keep up with some of these wonderful entrepreneurs. Their work ethic is prodigious. Their output is unbelievable. So run up quickly the white flag and say I work on, not in. Which is great. Obviously, enormous amount of courage and determination, because us mere mortals would sort of throw in the towel. It's incredible, and I suppose a deep sense of self-belief. Also, keep in mind, because I think sometimes we idealize, and the listeners tuning in might think, well, these people are superhuman. They're often very vulnerable, and they're quite happy to show, like, geez, Paul, this is like full on. This is, they what do they say? A tree that lasts, knows how to bend in the wind. So they're happy to have a tear, have a freak out, and then go back to the desk.
I'll let you have a drink of water at 5 a.m. in the morning. Yeah.
I'll
So obviously, with the incredible success that you've had, Paul, I've started to note that whilst I was researching for this, that you're getting involved with a lot more philanthropy work. And I started having a look at what you're doing at, and excuse my pronunciation, Rehoboth? Rehoboth? Am I saying that right?
Yes, Rehoboth or yeah, fine, Rehoboth. I think there's a biblical reference there. And thanks for shouting that out. Now,
Tell us more about that. Yeah, this children's village.
So that's a story that goes back around this hour, goes back 25 years. And all credit goes to, the founders. When I say the founders, the Australian arm, Di Singer, Jeff Myman, Yolanta Masayada, and others kind of wrote me in 25 years ago and said, Paul, we're building with people in South Africa. We're building an orphanage for, from the ground up. We've got a block of land in KwaZulu-Natal for, talk about the most marginalized, in our community of orphans that have been orphaned by HIV. So these are usually African children, found, left on doorsteps, found abandoned on the beach in Durban, and just they very much know where to go, and we're going to build this. I don't think I've even told a lot of people this. In fact, I might have told Di Singer, but I was a bit frustrated at the time. 25 years ago, I'm trying to get a business going. On a Sunday, I'm tired. I've got to go to a a meeting. I've got to be the guest auctioneer. Excuse me. Last time we had tech issues, Todd.
Now it
looks like I've got voice issues, and it is to be fair, 5:30 in the morning, so maybe I'm suffering from a bit of sort of post-sleep blues. But anyway, so fortunately, because this has been so rewarding for me, that old saying, when you give, you get. When you help, it comes back to you. Starting from this vision, which wasn't mine, I was one of the workhorses, and there's a vibrant community now, very well organized. Many hundreds of children have passed through from infancy to university. There is a religious element to it, and I'm not religious, but hey, if people can do good, carry wear whatever banner you like, and there's an incredible couple, Alphonse and Yvonne, who run. They're from Holland originally. They run the village. It is the most magnificent place. They welcome visitors. So if anyone wants to give me a shout out, I'll give you the details. Or just Google Rehoboth, KwaZulu-Natal, you'll find it. And incredibly uplifting, and a story of great hope. There's been incredible advances in HIV/AIDS. So these are healthy, robust children moving into adulthood, and I couldn't be more proud.
They must fill you with immense pride and warmth that you can do good whilst being commercially sound as well.
Yeah, and there were many times I was going to go to Di and say, "Look, Di, I just can't do it. I'm a young guy, not so young, but I'm in my late 30s. I've got a young family. I'm trying to build a business. I can't help you. I can't do this anymore." And in many ways, obviously, I never had to work in it. I was non-executive again, working on, not in. But the fact that, I was able to stay the course and move this vision to a self-sustaining model now that gets an enormous amount of support from the South African government, from many Australian South African expats who obviously love to give back, but just as importantly, the Australian community have been incredibly generous. And so this is now a well-funded, always looking for money, as they should be, but it's essentially a very well-funded organization that continues to grow and build out and build more cottages, get more nurses, get more teachers. What a story from an empty field in KwaZulu-Natal.
I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce that, but kudos to yourself, Paul. So what we've had in the media most recently from you, and I think would be probably the most adept little story to tell, is give us a little bit of a journey through My Deal, because we obviously all saw the news in the last couple of weeks with Woolworths, and it looks like a fantastic outcome. Give us a little bit of the woe to go there.
Yeah, that's right. So I think, you rewind the tape. I mean, for me personally, as the co-founder of Deals Direct, launched that in 2004, and had, I suppose, and not complaining, had a fairly, I suppose, modest exit in 2012, 13. Timing is everything. The terms weren't, they were fine. I mean, I learned a lot. It was an incredible journey. But I guess I'd have to sort of have to admit, in the spirit of self-awareness, that it was a suboptimal, exit. But of course, I often give advice to young founders. I say small, I wouldn't even call them failures, but small learnings are the stepping stones to success. So that in turn led to NORA, which led to other things. But while I was getting out of my deal, a young guy called Sean Senvertne, while I was getting out of Deals Direct, I've got to use the terminology correctly,
Yeah,
because
too
it
many
can get a
deals,
bit
Paul. Too many
confusing.
deals.
Yeah, exactly. It's way too many deals. But that's my background. Love a bargain was our
Love a
slogan at
deal.
Deals Direct. I love the value play, and it's very hard to, I love value. As I was getting out of Deals Direct to venture capital, and we merged with Grays Online and lots of other things, a young guy called Sean Senvertne in Melbourne was getting into my deal. And I think he identified an opportunity to be, we were a full end-to-end fulfillment online retailer with massive warehousing. He decided to really go down the marketplace route, which I think was very smart. So a pioneer in marketplaces, such a smart guy, lovely guy. And Sean and his partner Kate started my deal. Very humble beginnings, like most entrepreneurial journeys. And I guess he looked at Deals Direct, as many people had, because we were so early in the piece. Looked at what we'd done right and what we'd done wrong. Got a bit of inspiration and some learnings, and he reached out to me. I think we met at a NORA event, and we stayed in touch, sort of industry friends, and an enormous amount of respect for what he was doing. Then fast forward, two and a half years ago, Sean said, look, he wants to take this to the next level. Business is growing dramatically. An IPO is on the cards. There's no doubt about that. And would I take on the role of non-executive chairman? Well, I needed about 5 seconds to think about it, because a whole lot of things came up for me. One is, and I think going back to your earlier question, what makes a good advisor, good board member? The first question, Todd, is, can I add value? And I felt there, I'm going to give that a tick, because, sort of 8 years with Deals Direct, there's got to be some learnings and IP that I feel I could impart, and missteps as well. So that was a big tick. And then I took on the role. Obviously, I had been quite limited in my exposure to listed companies, although Deals Direct did list with Grays. Afterpay, obviously, I followed that journey very closely. But this was really my third foray in ASX listed environments, which I'm really keen on to learn. I think there's enormous opportunity. I'm a big fan of the Australian Stock Exchange. So I jumped in. The IPO happened, very successfully. Obviously, at a time where the markets were very strong, and timing, as I said earlier, windows open and shut. You've got to find them, and it was perfect timing. And it got away. And the business under Sean's leadership, an incredible leadership team, has Dean Ramler, who was the founder of Milan Direct, Ryan Gracie, who came over from Catch, Josh Mangan, Kate Dockery. The list goes on. The business has really boomed over the last few years. Well, it's grown solidly. 10-year overnight success, another good one. I love these businesses. Institute's been going for 10 years. Culture Kings for around that length of time as well. So these are not overnight successes. But I think, I'm always looking for partnerships and alliances. Whenever I'm in business or advising business or on a board, I'm always saying, you've got to find your friends. You can't do it all yourself. And you can't be good at everything. So find alliances and support and partnerships that resonate. And I think, that's how the chat started with Woolworths and my deal. How could we work together?
So with all these plates spinning, Paul, where do you keep your energy and your passion? How do you keep that fresh and relevant?
Lots of coffee, and I
Lots
know
of
that
coffee, caffeine, definitely.
I know your viewers, given the time of morning here in London, wouldn't mind me having a cuppa with you. But I do
Absolutely.
like my coffee, and I think it is it is good. Sometimes I get overfueled, but look, I think the truth of it is, it's in a lovely stage of my career now. I'm in my early 60s. My kids are going nicely. I remarried three years ago, which has been a great gift and privilege. And so I think gratitude. I have my
Mm,
days like all of us, but gratitude's a very strong energy to tune into, and you'll hear that from many people.
mm.
And I think I've just found, late in my career, in my autumn years, I found my sweet spot, which is non-executive roles, working on, not in, working alongside great founders who infinitely better at doing what they do than I ever was. And I feel incredibly lucky. That's really it in a nutshell. So that gets me out of bed in the morning. And, I wish I'd had, these learnings early, but I guess that's life. You've got to go through it. You can't go around it.
It is indeed. It is indeed. So I'm
Mm.
assuming with you being over in London, I understand your role with NORA has now started to expand almost into a global kind of element now.
Oh yeah, thanks for the shout out. So I should say again, if I can grab one of the caps behind you, one of the roles that was offered to me 2 years ago. I've been going to the big show in New York for the last sort of 10 years. It's a great, it's a fantastic retail event. It's been going for decades and decades, run by the National Retail Federation. Around the NRF in the US, there's a body called FIRA, the Federation of International Retail Associations. And look, really at the core of it, it's a network group that meets once a year at the big show in New York, meets mid-year in September. We're meeting in Paris. And it is an industry network of association heads from around the world. You pick a country and there's an association head. And I'm now the vice chairman. I'm very privileged to be the vice chair of FIRA, and I'm on a bit of a tour of duty, I suppose, representing Australia, sort of representing NORA, as best I can. I'm here with my FIRA hat on in London at Shop Talk in London, meeting with association heads. We had a dinner last night, the heads of Greece, Italy, two associations out of Brussels. Just amazing
Sounds like
to
the
meet.
old United Nations you're running, Paul.
It's totally the United Nations of retail, of online retail specifically, of e-commerce, and fascinating to discover and talk about the challenges and the opportunities. And really, Todd, the world is flat. I mean, we've all got the same opportunities. We've all got the same challenges, which is exciting.
So that leads me into what was going to be my last question for you. Whilst you're over in London and you've just spent the first day at e-tail there, are British, European retailers facing the same challenges as our Australian counterparts?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. There's a bit of a muted feeling. The show opened yesterday, and about 3,000 people is my estimate, and quite a few good keynotes. And I think there is a more muted recognition that we're now in post-COVID environments. Certainly, from an online retail perspective, the recovery, or the post-COVID environment will be a marathon, not a sprint, and it's sort of back to normal business, but that the macro conditions are a bit tougher than all of us would like, and sentiment, particularly around uncertainties in the world. So a very common narrative to what we're hearing in Australia. Still tons of opportunity, a recognition that disruption and opportunity go hand in hand. So for the brave, this will present enormous opportunities. But yeah, the world, it's not the easiest environment to work in at the moment, but the adaptability that we've all shown over the last few years we need to dig even deeper.
I think that's a very key word, and it's with our merchants that we see being successful. It's that adaptability, and it's the seeing that the tides are changing and moving with those tides and not trying to swim against them. And you saw the same with those that were successful with COVID. It's those that moved with. Paul,
Yeah.
You are so incredibly generous with your time, your energy, your enthusiasm, and what you do for our ecosystem. Thank you for taking such an early morning in London. It's incredibly generous of you. if people, you do want to get in touch with Paul, have a look up jampad.co, jampad.co. You'll see all of Paul's investments and charitable work on there. And I might be hanging him out to dry here, but he did say he never turns down a coffee. So he's always a good man to have in your network. Thank you again for your time, Paul.
That's great, Todd. Thanks so much for the chat, and for all of those that have tuned in. Thanks for joining us, and yeah, look forward to seeing you back in Australia. I'm back in terms of coffee. I'm back in Oz end of July, but obviously available to Zoom anytime, and loving time on the road. So look forward to catching up on my return. And thanks to you and Raven and the team at Overdose for your time and all the work you guys do for the industry and for the ecosystem. Look forward to seeing you. Online retailer at the end of July is coming up. Hopefully you'll be there. I certainly won't miss that one.
Yep.
And looking forward to catching up.
Raven's doing her first big OE over to online retailer. So look out for the biggest afro there, and that's Raven. And she'll be rocking and rolling all day long.
I mean, when you talk about energy, Raven's got energy to. I'll tap into that for a little bit about what she's got spare, but she's a wonderful, wonderful.
We've been trying to work out how to bottle it, Paul, but we haven't mastered it yet.
Keep
Brilliant.
working on it.
Thank you, my friend.